I sometimes like to think of myself as an amateur storyteller, and in this video I'll be putting on my writer's hat and attempting to edit and rewrite the story of episode 5 of Wintermute. I have a video coming later where I'll go into detail critiquing this episode's release, but for now I'll just be focusing on how I think it could have been made better. One of my goals is to leave the story outcomes functionally the same, but by writing in some new details to the story and changing how events play out to get there, the story experience could be so much better. Look out for this icon in the bottom right, which I'll be using to indicate my changes to the story. Okay, let's get into it. Astrid wakes from a dream of her departed son Jack, which is a great way at the start to show how much he weighs on Astrid's mind. His passing made her devote her life to researching his ailment, and now to risking everything to save her friend Jane's child from a similar fate. Astrid talks to Jane about the cure and how she believes Will is on his way with the case. And Jane tells her about the troubles they've been having with the quarantine, how they can't contact the outside world, that more people are getting sick, some are getting scared and restless and attempting to break quarantine, and Dr. Larson is nowhere to be found. Astrid tells Jane she's going to go around town and see if she could learn anything. Let's talk about the rumors of a murderer on the loose. It's a red herring and needlessly complicates the plot, in my opinion. I get that rumors and misinformation spreading is what happens in times like these, but it left me wondering, is something going to come from this? Episode 5 has enough to try to accomplish in tying up all the loose threads without adding more threads that lead nowhere. Let's not muddy the waters more. Also, it just never made sense to me in the first place. People in the town know there's a quarantine. People are sick. They know the symptoms of strange behavior like sleepwalking straight into the water and the cold. They don't know why, but they do know people are doing that. So I just don't know where the murderer theory comes from. Oh, wait a minute. It came from Terry, didn't it? Of course. All right, let's pin this one on the board and talk to him later. Tell him to settle down. Leaving Jane's house, Astrid goes to the local bar and witnesses some of the townsfolk talking about the mysterious disappearance of the doctor and the constable. Plans to escape or wait it out until spring, etc. She goes to the barkeep and he tells her more about Dr. Larson's disappearance. He also asks her to check in on some of the townsfolk who are too elderly or too stubborn to leave their homes and come to Cooper's. He wants her to see if they're okay and if they need anything. Walking through town, she'll see some of the houses have smoke coming from the chimneys and candlelight flickering in the window. This gives Astrid and the player time to explore the town and get to know the people. While in their homes, we wouldn't be able to loot. All the cabinets would be just for looks and unopenable, so we won't be stealing from these nice folks who let us warm up in their homes. We could meet some elderly woman, for example, who's caring for her husband in the doctor's absence. She offers Astrid a nice hot cup of coffee, maybe some pie, or a warm knit scarf, so we'll still get some goodies. We can learn more about the town and what's happening from these townsfolk we meet while making progress, instead of hanging around the bar for 30 minutes in real life trying to hear all the voice lines. This whole experience would satisfy the players who've been waiting all this time to explore Perseverance Mills and give them more of a feel for the town. Coming back to Cooper's Blind, she asked the barkeep if maybe she could check out Dr. Larson's office for anything that could help. Maybe she needs some medicine for that old woman's husband. Episode 3 had players play doctor with some of the patients, and we could do it again. The bartender agrees and gives her the key, and Astrid explores the doctor's office. Once inside, she finds a few unusual things. Look at the size of this lantern. That's smaller than usual. Oh, and look at these switches real low to the ground. Dr. Larson must be a small guy. Maybe that's why he's so hard to find. After ruffling through his things, she finds what she's looking for and, oh, would you look at that? She finds a photo of good old Dr. Larson. That'll help us find him. Let's just hang this up on our board here. Astrid finds the makeshift morgue and notes from the doctor saying that he and the constable went out to search for missing patients. So Astrid sneaks out of town, breaking quarantine to try and find the doctor or the constable. She finds the latter, as we did in Chapter 5, as some wolf's lunch, But also at the last spot we go to, she finds Dr. Larson alive, but maybe not so well. He needs some help. So Astrid throws him on her back like Yoda and treks back to Perseverance Mills. Once back, she takes care of Dr. Larson, and together they talk about what's been going on with the victims of this sickness and their theories. Alzheimer's and psychosis, sleepwalking, fascination with water and people drowning. They get to nerd out together with some doctor lingo. Jane comes in and asks if Astrid will check on Terry, which is good because we got to talk to him and tell him to settle down a bit. He's scaring the townsfolk with these crazy killer theories. Up at the radio tower, we meet the coolest guy on Great Bear Island. We learn some interesting things from him. The quarantine started days before the power went out. He witnessed a powerful signal go out before the aurora, but couldn't make out what it was because it destroyed his equipment. And he learned of a ship stranded in Desperation Bay, which is our next objective.
The signal came from the bay just north of town. Desperation Bay. I meant to check it out myself, but frankly, I'm scared as shit to leave this place. I think there's probably a murderer out there.
Damn it, Terry. Look, we're changing the script, okay? There's no killer. So just chill out, okay? Can you do that? Astrid goes into Desperation Bay to learn what's going on out there. Sailors were displaying all the symptoms that they'd observed in the town. Some of them had to be tied up to prevent them from walking overboard into the water. Astrid starts putting it together that something is affecting people's minds on a wide scale. Something tied into the aurora and water. She gets back into town, slightly panicked and overwhelmed after seeing all the bodies, and tries to convince the townsfolk that they have to leave the coast and get away from the water. Astrid is starting to become untethered here. She's spent her whole life as a doctor, a researcher, someone who deals in science and facts, and now the world is showing her something she can't explain. And it affects everyone, from young to old and animal to human. The world has changed. As Jane tries to comfort Astrid and lead her back home, in walks Mathis.
Well, well. Looks like we found the party. You leaving so soon? Doctor.
What a great entrance for Mathis. But we have to edit out that last part about him knowing who Astrid is, because it makes no sense. Let's head on to Chapter 2. We start with Will tending a fire while speaking to Methuselah, and it's revealed to the player in this interaction that the old man is not real. Will is experiencing the third man phenomenon. Look it up, it's pretty interesting. Will's introspection here is a pivotal scene to understanding things later in the ending. There's a great video by Starz that goes into that with more detail than I can do here, so I'll link that in the description and you should definitely check that out. Alright, so Will and Jace wake up. She recounts her dream to Will and then they get moving. They come to an area where they are somehow forced to split. Maybe it's a log bridge that Jace comes across first, and as she's crossing, she has to jump across because the log rolls or cracks and falls down into the ravine, so Will can't follow. The convicts hear the noise and go to investigate. Jace looks back at Will with fear on her face.
Damn it, you fools!
She says as she gets up and starts running down her path. Will runs down his path while dodging shots being fired and enters a cave. You could hear the convicts scrambling to climb down and give chase, so you keep moving. Maybe there could be a little bar at the bottom of the screen that indicates how close the convicts are getting to you, and if they get too close, you'll have to retry from a checkpoint. After this chase scene, Will loses them after passing the area with wolves. Maybe we hear one of the guys get jumped by a wolf, and some screaming and shots ring out while they struggle with the wolf, and Will gets away. At the trailer, Will luckily reunites with Jace, but almost as soon as they do, they hear the convicts who are still on their trail, and were only temporarily delayed by the wolves. They run to the river crossing, and here, Will keeps the flare gun and makes it to the other side with his cable car. Jace gets in the one on the other side and actually uses the crank herself and starts to come over. The bad guys catch up at this moment and start shooting, and it's up to Will to provide cover for Jace. If he fails, then it's a simple checkpoint reload. With the flare gun, the player will have to shoot in the convict's general area where there will be something flammable like hay, tarps, suspicious-looking explosive barrels, whatever. A successful flare shot will send all that up in smoke and stop the bad guys from shooting while we get a cutscene of Jace getting off the cable car and Will smashing up the contraption so the bad guys can't follow. Then they run off together down the path towards the mine. Inside, Will helps Jace face her fears and get past the obstacles in the mine. They get some time to talk in here, mainly during the elevator sequences, about the radio telescope, about why Will is carrying around the hard case, and about what her and Atwood are researching. This would take some of the burden of exposition off of Dr. Atwood later, pacing out the story and sparing the player of such a long cutscene. Maybe just before the telling, the elevator goes beyond the reach of the light and they're in total darkness. Jace starts hyperventilating and Will reassures her. "I'm right here. It's okay. We're safe." He asks her to tell him about the research she's doing with Atwood to keep her mind off her fears. Jace can tell Will the history of the Carrington event and how what's happening now with the power coming back on during the auroras clearly seems to be some sort of Carrington event. In the darkness while she's telling the story, we could get similar visual accompaniment as we did before, while Will imagines the story being told to him. As the story nears its finish, they reach the top of the elevator shaft and Will turns the lights on, much to Jace's relief. There you go. We got some answers and exposition out while simultaneously making progress in the story and building connection between two characters. Better for pacing than listening to Dr. Atwood's 20-minute lecture in one sitting. They come out of the mines and enter the Suzuki radio telescope area, meeting Dr. Atwood. They trade stories, Will delivers the message, and then ends the night going to sleep in the bunk. I'd like to change Will's dream here. Enough vague posting about their breakup. Astrid dreamed of Jack in Chapter 1, and now it's Will's turn. Let's show some backstory to elaborate on these two characters, since it's such an important piece of this story, instead of leaving it completely up to the audience. The dream starts in flashes. He's with Astrid in the hospital, and they're smiling as they hold their son for the first time. Flash forward. Jack's sick, and Astrid is dabbing his head with a cloth, while Will stands close by. Now we see Jack's funeral. Then some argument he and Astrid had afterwards. Something showing how Astrid dove into work and practicality to handle things and keep moving forward, while Will froze and dove into introspection and sentimentality. She wants him to help her out, and he wants her to talk to him. The argument ends and Will gets into a truck and drives to his dad's old hangar. Here we can have the card scene as before, right before waking up. Is all this implied already? Yeah, but as I said, it's such an important part of the story and background for these two characters that I think it should be shown. Also, it makes it more clear to the audience and will be useful for them to know with what's coming in the story. It's like having a last time on Wintermute section to catch people up on what's happened between them if they haven't played the previous episodes, or indeed if they did but don't remember because it's been so many years. Now, Will wakes up and goes into Dr. Atwood's lab, and she's talking all about how she could get her data, and Will says,
I would love to help, but there's a place I gotta be. I delivered your message. I got Jace back to you. My work here is done. There are other people who need me.
Here, Dr. Atwood needs to do some explaining and tell Will why it's so important, to persuade him to help. She needs to explain Jeremiah's message of Wintermute, and I think it needs to be more than just reminding Atwood of the name of the guy that she based her whole life's research on. What makes this so difficult is what information could Jeremiah possibly have that's important to Atwood that could be relayed with a single word? She's at a radio telescope, so she could detect coronal mass ejections before they hit Earth. So she likely had a heads up before the first flare and doesn't need to be reminded that this is a Carrington-type event, since the results by the time she gets the message, after multiple auroras, is pretty self-evident. This is the hardest part of trying to fix this story. Trying to find a meaning for the Wintermute message that makes sense. She tells Will that Jeremiah, real name John, was a corporal in the Canadian military and came across her research after stumbling onto something big. The government was working on top-secret projects with a firm called Yarn Industries. They were behind Rudiger's failed experiment and were trying to replicate and control the deleterious mental effects first discovered by Edmund Wintermute. These references to Wintermute led Jeremiah to Atwood's research, where he was able to put together an idea of what they were working on. He tried to do some more digging, but eventually got caught spying and went to prison for decades. After getting out, he took on the guise of a hunter and a trapper, while continuing to do what he could to find proof of what the government and Yarn Industries was up to. He'd trek up to the mountains and spy on military base activity. He'd use his shortwave to monitor military channels. Just before the first flare, he intercepts a message. A branch off of Yarn Industries, Seraphim Sleep Research Center, was tasked with creating a cure or treatment for the mental sickness. The message he intercepts is that their cure has been stolen and that something big is coming. The code word Wintermute is an emergency protocol for worst-case scenario if the project gets out of control. The only safety now is to get underground in a bunker. At some earlier point in their collaboration, Jeremiah must have told her about this military code word, and she would have understood it as a message. Atwood finishes her tale and tells Will that this facility has a large, well-stocked underground bunker that people can come to for safety. But it's not currently functional, and she needs Will to go out there and restore power by going to 3 substations. Restoring operation to a bunker where people could go to safety is a more convincing argument than some obsessive nerd saying she needs her mysterious data and she'll only answer your questions after you put off your personal mission and risk your life for her. So, Will agrees to the mission, and they warn him before leaving to watch out for dangerous wildlife in the area. Will finds a shotgun in the supply room and makes use of it to fight off multiple wolves and even a cougar during the mission. He restores power to all 3 substations and makes it back to Suzuki just as the aurora is starting. He helps Atwood and Jace retrieve their data from the memory buffers, and upon analyzing the data, Atwood hits us with the info of how massive this event is. A vague range of 40 to 400 years. The chapter ends with Will saying he needs to get to Perseverance Mills to help Astrid and bring the people there back to the bunker. We come back to Astrid held hostage with Jane and Dr. Larson at the clinic. Mathis threatens the doctor and says he'd better save Donner or he'll kill Jane and Astrid. Dr. Larson examines Donner and says he can't help him without a trauma kit, which can be found at the Starz station. Jane says it's north of Desperation Bay, where Astrid just came back from. Mathis says to Astrid, "You better get going." Astrid and Heller are on their way to the Starz station when Heller complains of the cold and wants to warm up. Then he sees the train. He helps Astrid diagnose that the train is missing some parts, and after getting that fixed, he happily gets on with her. He obviously has an interest in trains, he won't have to walk anymore, and it's nice and warm by the train engine. No reason for him not to come with. During the train ride, they talk a little bit. Astrid says, "Why are you with Mathis? You don't seem as bad as him." Heller says, "Shut up. We need to just do what we're told. You don't cross Mathis. It's not healthy." Astrid says, "All right, but it's a long train ride. We don't need to ride in silence. I saw the smile you had climbing aboard. Tell me about your interest in trains." Heller can then tell Astrid a personal story about riding on a train, maybe when he was a kid, or maybe he has a kid of his own and is remembering their happiness on the train. They get to the Starz station, and Heller stays with the train to keep the engine and himself warm, while Astrid retrieves the trauma kit. When she gets back, there's a couple wolves circling the train engine, and Heller calls out to Astrid for help. Luckily, she had found a flare pistol at the Starz station and fires a shot to scare the wolves. On the ride back to town, Heller thanks her for the rescue, and explains to her his relationship with Mathis. He doesn't really like Mathis, but he has to do what he says because he's crazy. You don't say no to Mathis if you want to keep breathing while he's in charge, and you do whatever you can to make sure he doesn't get pissed. How's that working for you? Astrid says. You wouldn't get it, he says. I do what I can to survive. One day you might find yourself asking if what you've done to stay alive is something you can live with, Astrid says. The chapter ends as they continue driving down the track back towards Perseverance Mills during the aurora. Chapter 4. Chapter 4 starts with Will in Perseverance Wilds, or some area outside of town. He sees a campfire in the distance straight ahead and goes there. At the campfire are Jeremiah and Molly, and we see a cutscene of them meeting. Molly sees him first and raises her bow and yells at him. Jeremiah intervenes and makes Molly lower her bow. This is the man that saved my life. Jeremiah, good to see you feeling well enough to be getting around. What are you doing out here? Hunting, of a sort. I came across Molly here, and together we've been tracking some dangerous convicts on the loose. Mathis? You know the man? We've run into each other a few times. Well, you're lucky to still be breathing, Mackenzie. That's me, Mr. Luck. I found Atwood, by the way. I delivered your message. You met her? How is she? Is she okay? Molly interrupts. Listen, boys, we don't have time. If we want to catch up to the bad guys, we gotta move now. You could chat on the way. Where are they? Heading to Perseverance Mills. Astrid, we've got to get there before they do. Astrid? Ah, so you're the mysterious guy with the case. Huh? Come on, we've got a lot to talk about, not a lot of time to do it. Scene changes to the clinic in Perseverance Mills as Heller and Astrid have delivered the trauma kit and Dr. Larson is finishing up work on Donner. Dr. Larson says that he's done his best, but it's all up to Donner now. He's been without medical help for too long, and he's lost a lot of blood internally. Donner wakes up and speaks to Mathis and then dies. Mathis flies into a rage and blames Astrid for taking too long getting the trauma kit. He starts choking her out, and in the background we see Heller conflicted, but ultimately tells Mathis to stop and shoves him off of Astrid. Mathis stumbles up and wipes some spit off his lip and says, Oh, you just made a big mistake, Heller. Mathis, it's not her fault. You're losing it, man. Is that so? Well, maybe I'll just take it out on you instead. Mathis starts fighting Heller, and Vashon is looking on like, guys, stop it. Heller dodges a lunge from Mathis, and Mathis crashes to the floor in the back hallway to the garage. Jeremiah and Molly burst in, with Jeremiah tackling Vashon and killing him with a knife. Molly shoots Heller in the shoulder, and Astrid yells, No, Molly, not him! Mathis looks quickly back and forth between Heller with an arrow in him and Vashon with a knife in his chest, and scrambles in retreat out the back way. Jeremiah asks, Should I go after him? Molly says, Later. We've got to get Astrid here back to Mackenzie. Mackenzie? My Mackenzie? But how? No time to explain. We gotta go. We get the reunion scene by the tree where Will and Astrid finally meet and he gives her the case, but then says there's one last thing I gotta do. Will goes to Perseverance Mills where the convicts have now started torching the town. Will sees that the convicts are armed and decides that using his own weapons against an armed gang and having a shootout wouldn't work to his favor, so he sneaks up behind some of them and chokes them out. He gets to Cooper's and goes inside to save the people from being held hostage by the convicts in there. He tells them to gather warm clothes, food, and supplies, and get ready to follow him to safety, since Mathis has torched the town. While they get ready, Will goes to the radio shack to leave his message. After leaving his message, Mathis arrives, and they start fighting. Will is holding his own a bit, but is starting to lose the fight, when suddenly Terry comes up from behind and hits Mathis with a folding chair. I always wanted to do that, he says. Will takes advantage of this and beats the crap out of Mathis. Mathis is on the ground, wheezing and bleeding from the face, but still as cocky as ever. "That's all you got, pilot? Why don't you kill me? You can't, can you?" Will says, "You're not worth it," and starts to walk away. Mathis yells, "Don't you walk away from me. I will destroy everything you love. I will burn everything. I will rule this island, and I will make you all feel real pain." Will turns and says, "I have some people to protect right now, but I promise you when I'm done, I will be back and I will stop you." Now we get the scene at the bunker where everyone's waiting for Will. Will appears over the horizon with Terry and other people from Cooper's bar, including the old granny from earlier. I imagine players would be really upset at the convicts setting fire to the town and worried about Granny's safety. That's why I wrote her in. The people go into the bunker, and Will and Astrid talk at the bunker entrance. Astrid says, "I've missed you." "I've missed you too, Astrid." "Come on. Come in. Let's get out of the cold." "I can't do that." "What are you talking about?" "It's been so long. I thought I lost you, but I only lost myself. I realize now I have to move forward. I've spent too long being stagnant. I will come back to you. I will see you again, but I can't right now." "Will, don't do this." "I'm sorry, Astrid. This is your path, but it's not mine." "I'll always love you, Will. Stay alive out there." "I love you too, Astrid, and I will see you again." Will nods at Jeremiah, and he shuts the door, and Will is alone out there. Says he has to keep some promises. Goes back to Barry Greymother. The ending cutscene can progress much the same, except for Will is on his own as he buries Greymother, and you could show a separate scene of Mathis and his gang walking on the road somewhere. Maybe they pass a road sign that shows they're heading to Milton or some other town. So, as you can see, everything still happened mostly as it did during Hinterland's episode 5, but I think by putting in some edits, the story can be made better and make more sense. Quick recap of the things I fixed. I would redact most everything about the murderer theory, maybe just save for that one guy Eugene, but nobody believes or listens to him. Players should be able to explore the town and meet more townsfolk in their homes, satisfying player curiosity and building emotional attachment to the town, important for when the convicts burn it down later. Astrid finds Dr. Larson. His character is useful later, and this gives a satisfying conclusion to the mystery of his disappearance. And Mathis doesn't know who Astrid is when walking in the door for the first time. Alright, I separated Will and Jace in a more natural way, and have the convicts audibly giving chase to Will to keep pressure to move. Fixed the cable car scene, which is huge. Split up Atwood's exposition throughout the chapter to improve pacing. Gave Will a flashback dream to show the audience, who might not know or who might have forgotten, what Will and Astrid went through. And fixed the Wintermute message and Atwood's persuasion of Will to help. Thanks to Dr. Larson being in the story, Mathis forces the town doctor to care for Donner instead of somehow knowing Astrid is a doctor, and then sending the only one who could care for his son off on a dangerous mission in the wilds to get supplies. While on this mission, we get some character development from Heller, who has expressed dissatisfaction with Mathis before, but now finally finds the courage to push back. We see Will meet Jeremiah and Molly and get an explanation for why those two are together and what they're doing, and why they don't kill Mathis. We get an explanation for why Will doesn't shoot the convicts. We see Will save the townspeople and get them to the bunker. We have a final showdown between Will and Mathis that leaves it open for Mathis to do his bad guy thing and take over the island, and Will can still counter whatever Mathis is trying to do, but he doesn't need to be captive to do it, right? And there we go. Those are my changes to improve the story of episode 5. Sorry this took so long getting out. I got sick with the flu and, some real life stuff got in the way. Also, trying to solve the problems of the story took some thought, and editing this all was a chore. So anyway, let me know in the comments what you think of the changes. Do you have ideas on what you would change to the story? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Oh, and I want to thank you all so much for subscribing. I just recently noticed that I crossed the 500 subscriber count, which is awesome. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Okay, well, I'll see you next time with one last video on episode 5 before I resume my regular content. All right, take care. Stay warm, stay safe.